The Grand Palace, a true temple of gastronomy, stood majestically in the heart of the city, a few steps from the most prestigious avenues. Its elegant facade, decorated with old moldings and large bay windows, offered a glimpse of the sumptuous interior, where every detail demonstrated absolute refinement. Inside, the atmosphere was cozy, lulled by the subdued glow of the crystal chandeliers which made golden shimmers dance on the immaculate tablecloths. The walls, covered with period woodwork and master paintings, told a story of prestige and tradition. The fine silver cutlery gleamed under the lights. The crystal glasses gently resonated with each toast made by the wealthy guests. Every evening, the room filled with a hand-picked clientele. Financial tycoons, celebrities, ambassadors and wealthy heirs who came not only to savor exquisite dishes, but also to see and be seen. The Grand Palace was a place where power and influence met around a thermidor lobster or wagyu beef enhanced by black truffles. Among the waiters moving with choreographed precision, a woman stood out for her upright posture and serene gaze. Elise Moreau, dressed in a sober but elegant uniform, worked in silence, setting out dishes with an ease that betrayed a profound mastery of the art of service. Her apron, always immaculate, did not suffer from any imperfections. Every gesture was measured, every look, discreet but piercing. But what few people knew was that Elise was not a simple employee. Elise Moreau was the owner and soul of the Grand Palais. It was she who had built the reputation of the restaurant, imposed its standards of excellence, and shaped every detail, from the choice of the smallest ingredient to the finishing touches of the decor. But unlike other great restaurateurs who strutted around the room, shaking hands and collecting praise, Elise preferred the anonymity of the service. She understood very early on that her name and her face did not evoke, in the eyes of some, the typical image of a businesswoman at the head of a prestigious establishment. Could a black woman, from a modest background, really be at the helm of one of the most prominent restaurants in the city? Many doubted it. And yet, his rise had been meteoric. Born into a modest family, Elise grew up in a neighborhood where few young girls dreamed of gastronomy, let alone entrepreneurship. But she, fascinated by the aromas and textures of the dishes that her grandmother lovingly prepared, had promised herself to make cooking her empire. She had worked hard, saved every penny, suffered humiliating rejections and slammed doors, but she had never given up. His first restaurant, a small bistro nestled in a discreet alley, attracted attention for the accuracy of its dishes and the elegance of its service. In just a few years, thanks to her determination and talent, she had won over an increasingly prestigious clientele. And when she finally bought the Grand Palais from a starred chef at the end of his career, many predicted its failure. She had proven them wrong. That evening, however, one man would learn the hard way that it was not necessary never underestimate a woman like Elise Moreau. The doors of the Grand Palace opened in a light breeze, giving way to an imposing figure. Vincent Delacroix, an influential real estate businessman, entered the room with a confident step, followed by several associates who struggled to match his natural arrogance. His presence alone seemed to absorb attention. Tall with piercing eyes under thick eyebrows, he was dressed in a tailor-made suit whose fabric, a deep midnight blue, contrasted with the golden shine of his luxury watch. He sat at a table in the center of the room, as if he were the undisputed master. His air of superiority shone through in each of his gestures. He cast disdainful glances around him, detailing the room as if he were evaluating a building to buy, criticizing with lip service certain insignificant details of the decor. As soon as he sat down, his attitude became unbearable. He snapped his fingers for a waiter, ignoring the menu and immediately demanding a bottle of the most expensive wine on the menu. When the sommelier brought him a carefully selected bottle, Vincent looked at the label and gave a sneer of contempt. Such a picket in a place like this? Is this a joke? His tone was dry, sharp. Looking embarrassed, the sommelier tried to defend the choice of the estate, explaining the subtleties of the vintage. But Vincent didn't listen. He looked up at Elise, who was passing nearby, and, without even a glance at the sommelier, ordered, "You there. Bring me another bottle. This one is unworthy of my table." Elise stopped and, with her usual calm, replied, "Sir, this is a carefully selected Grand Cru. Maybe you prefer another grape variety? Vincent raised an eyebrow, then burst out laughing, as if a joke had just been told to him. I didn't ask you for your opinion. I asked for another wine. Do your job and serve me without question. A heavy silence settled. Conversations at neighboring tables had died down. Several customers looked away, uncomfortable. Vincent's associates looked at each other, hesitating between laughter and embarrassment. Elise remained impassive. I'll bring you a new bottle, sir. She turned on her heel, moving forward with the same mastery, the same grace. But as she walked away, Vincent Delacroix, always eager to assert his power, blurted out, loud enough for everyone to hear. It's crazy. These days they hire anyone. Even in the best restaurants, you can no longer avoid these classless waitresses. An icy cold fell on the room. A few nervous laughs erupted among his associates, too cowardly to contradict him. Some customers exchanged shocked looks, others looked away, as if to protect themselves from the embarrassment of the scene. Elise stopped for a fraction of a second. His back tensed slightly. She inhaled discreetly, controlling the surge of anger that threatened to shatter her legendary calm. Then, without a word, she resumed her way towards the counter, her figure straight and dignified despite the affront. But one thing was certain, she would not let this affront go unpunished. At the end of the meal, sated and drunk with his own self-importance, Vincent Delacroix leaned nonchalantly against the back of his chair, heaving a sigh of exasperation. He wiped an imaginary crumb from his lip with the end of his napkin, before snapping his fingers loudly. The person in charge, he thundered, his voice breaking the hushed murmur of the room. I demand to speak to the director. This service was deplorable. A tense silence ensued. The other customers exchanged awkward glances, some lowering their eyes to avoid getting involved in the humiliation he was inflicting on the employees. The waiters hesitated, confused, casting furtive glances at the counter. Finally, a young waiter, visibly uncomfortable, turned towards Elise Moreau. She, imperturbable, placed her tray down with natural grace and, in a gesture imbued with calm and mastery, untied her apron which she folded carefully before placing it on a chair. Then, with a measured step, she advanced towards Vincent's table and, under the stunned gazes of the assembly, sat down facing him. Elbows resting on the table, she gently crossed her hands and stared at Vincent with implacable serenity. Mr. Delacroix, it is an honor to welcome you to my establishment. A shudder ran through the room. Vincent's eyes widened, a smile of incomprehension frozen on his face. You're... what? He sat up slightly, as if those words had just slapped him. My establishment, Elise repeated, each syllable carried by a cutting sweetness. I am Elise Moreau, owner and founder of the Grand Palais. The impact was immediate. Vincent's associates, usually so quick to support him, froze, avoiding meeting his gaze. An icy silence fell over the table. Is this a joke, you, a waitress? Vincent stammered, as if his mind refused to put the pieces of the puzzle together. Elise offered him a subtle smile, but her gaze remained sharp. I'm a waitress when I choose to be. She paused, letting her words seep into Vincent's inflated ego. Slowly, the hubbub of the room came back to life. Murmurs circulated between the tables. The customers, fascinated, followed the stage as if it were the last act of a great theater. I worked my whole life to build this restaurant, she continued in a measured tone. But what matters most to me is respect, whether towards my customers or towards my staff. His words carried a weight that no one could ignore. The employees of the Grand Palais, frozen behind the counter or between the tables, felt a new pride. Vincent no longer had the same confidence. His arrogance had given way to confused anger, that of a man who felt his power was slipping away from him, but who did not know how to get it back. He opened his mouth to reply, but Elise didn't give him the chance. However, I do not tolerate a man coming here to insult my team, underestimate their work, and think he is above others. The whispers stopped. An invisible weight fell on Vincent's shoulders. He took a quick look around him. The faces he encountered were no longer admiring, but amused. Customers held back smiles, others exchanged knowing glances. His associates prudently avoided getting involved, understanding that the wind had just turned. Elise moved her chair back slightly, her calm intact. "I think you've put on enough of a show, Mr. Delacroix," she declared in a soft but firm voice. "You have finished your meal. The house will give you the bill, but I will ask you to never set foot here again." The sentence fell like a blade. Vincent, red with anger and embarrassment, stood up abruptly. His fingers clenched around his napkin betrayed his frustration. He looked around the room, desperately seeking support, but he only found indifferent or amused faces. In a final gesture of disdain, he took a wad of bills out of his pocket and threw it on the table, letting them fly slightly before scattering across the tablecloth. "Keep the change," he growled under his breath, before turning on his heel and leaving the restaurant with a stiff step. The silence stretched on, then broke. A thunderous applause invaded the room. The customers, some standing, clapped their hands with sincere enthusiasm. A man in a suit even raised his glass in respect, while an elderly lady smiled approvingly. The employees of the Grand Palais had their eyes shining with admiration. Elise, still seated, made no move to savor her triumph. She never sought revenge, only dignity. And that evening, she reminded everyone that respect cannot be bought, but must be earned.